I'll just talk a little bit about my farm in South Australia and probably what I've learnt sitting here just watching this morning's things. Farming in Australia probably couldn't be any different to farming here in New Zealand. So I probably should have spoken in the morning maybe to manage costs rather than tell you guys how to make more money, because all I need to do is make more money, is probably just get a bit more rain. But so I've got 400 mil rainfall country. Just a bit about the area. South Australia in the middle, centre. Adelaide's just above the little island, Kangaroo Island. 5,000 hectares. Crops are lentils, canola, wheat and barley. Historically, we've had a bit of a change. We've been cereal dominant and we'd always be looking for that break crop. However, now we're a lentil growers and the cereals are the break crops. So lentils are driving the profitability on our farm. So that's just been a little bit of a shift in the last probably 5 to 10 years. So our soil types are sands to loams. What I call a loam, you guys probably wouldn't call a loam. It's pretty much just sand. We're pretty much growing crops hydroponically, really. pH is 4.5 to 7.5. So the reason I mention that, I'm not sure how aware you guys of pH, but we really use that as a building block of our soil. It controls what nutrients we get, what nutrients we need to apply, and we have it varies over our landscape. A few constraints we have, we get compaction. Sand, you think wouldn't compact, but if you're building a house, you build it on nice sand because it doesn't move. Whereas clays, they crack, they move, they repair. So sands, they don't move, so we're doing a lot of deep ripping on our compaction. Non-wetting sands, you guys probably haven't heard of non-wetting sands, but our sand becomes hydrophobic. The more organic matter we put on, whether via a manure or because we've got no clay content in them, they build up a waxy coating on the sand molecule or the sand particle, and you just wet it and it just falls off. So it's really quite strange for someone that's never seen it. We've got a bit of high pH country and we've got a bit of low pH country. So probably touched a little bit based on that, but that's sort of our type of soil. This is a soil test we get. 400 mil rainfall country. Most of it does land in the growing season. It's a dune swale landscape, so we've got hills that are sandy soils and our flats are sort of higher textured soils. We'd call them loams to clays, but they're not really. They're probably sandy loams to loamy sands.
What do you call your hills?
Yeah, sand. So organic carbon on the topsoil might be 0.6 to 0.8%. So 0.8, then it gets down to 0.6 to 0.4 as it moves further down. So it's really growing things hydroponically. So our input costs are quite high for what we're growing. PBI is phosphorus buffering index. That's a term we use to how much when we apply phosphorus, how much it ties up in the soil. You might know. I'm just going to explain some things because I was sitting there wondering what T0 was. It took me a while. I had to Google it to work out it was a fungicide timing early on. So just the terminology can sometimes be a little bit different. So what's driving our desire for adopting some precision ag and improving our profitability? So this is a bit of a land prices in Australia, and that land prices there are my local land prices. So 2006, $4,000 a hectare. Used to always double every 10 years. So after 10 years, it doubled. The next 5 years, it doubled. And then now it's pretty well plateaued. Whether or not it will continue to plateau or it's just a bit of a run-in season, higher interest rates. We've had a couple of stinkers in South Australia. So who knows where that's going to go. If we knew, we'd be, very wealthy people. And that's for an average yield of 4.5 tonne of wheat, 4 tonne of barley, 1.5 tonne of lentil. So I've said pre-ameliorated. So lentils is where we make so much more money if we can improve the soil. So that could easily go to 2 to 2.5 tonnes on the ameliorated soils with 2.5 tonne of canola. So we've got a rising cost of production just like you guys have been talking about. But agronomically, cropping is very similar. We can talk the same language, but probably running a business is a fair bit different. So I can spread my costs over 5,000 hectares, 20,000 tonne, 15 to 20,000 tonne. That's obviously a lot different. You guys have got a much larger margin on your land, but it's of a smaller scale. So the businesses are probably going to be run quite differently when it comes to being able to adopt a certain technology versus if it's a machinery that's going to get used on more hectares. So my precision ag journey, that started with phosphorus. So we just wanted to try and use one of our most expensive inputs a little bit more efficiently. So we just started replacing phosphorus. If we took a tonne off of cereals, we'd put 4 kilos of P back on. And then over time, we sort of noticed that just replacing it, we're finding these greyer soils with higher pH. They were just getting a little bit of a tingy green early on, and so we'd get some tissue tests, and they'd always come back low in P. So we found a bit of a correlation between the pH of the soil and the satellite NDVI early on. So we'd measure this, we'd just get a satellite map of the paddock early July the previous year, and we'd overlay a pH map with it, and we worked out that those soils there we can really push a lot harder with phosphorus. So district practice is probably, say, 60 to 80 kilos per hectare of MAP. On these areas, we're using between 150 and 180 kilos of phosphorus. And conversely, we can use a lot less on our acidic sands. So we set up some trials just to ground truth that, and that's what we sort of came up with. We worked out we didn't have to actually put any phosphorus at all on our acidic sands, but you tell a farmer not to use fertiliser, they're going to get pretty anxious. So we decided we'll just put 25 kilos of MAP on those soils. And then high input costs. We sort of started doing this just before the Russians and Ukraine started having a little bit of arguments. So phosphorus went up $1,500 to $1,500 a tonne. So we thought we got to get a bit smarter. So we ditched the replacement, and we're just going solely on the pH and the NDVI. So the theory being is my old man, he would have been applying 60 to 80 kilos of MAP on blanket rate over the whole farm for the last 30 to 50 years. So on those soils where there's zero response, there must be a really high bank. So in the first year, we saved a road train load of MAP. So that's 90 grand, paid for any sort of variable rate controller, any sort of analysis. So that was a really good win. We were only planning to do that method for a couple of years while fertilisers was very, very high. Hasn't really seemed to come back. So we've been waiting to sort of think, we'll basically put all that fertiliser back on. We'll just put it back on cheaply, but it hasn't really come off. So we've just slowly crept it back up to try and not get caught with a lack of yield, because as soon as you start cutting things, you've got to be very sure that you're not going to reduce yield, because as soon as you reduce yield, you're definitely in the red. Lentils, so I touched on lentils before. They're a highest gross margin crop, and improved them that justifies any investment in tech. So on our sands, the lentils, they struggle to accumulate biomass to maximise yield, and on the loams, they can sometimes accumulate too much biomass. So they grow really well. You want to get down on your knee, take a photo, put it on Instagram, but during the spring comes along, gets very hot, gets very dry, and they just fall over, and they haven't produced any seeds at all. So we decided, what can we do with this? We're going to sow them really, really thin on those heavy soils. So this is a bit of a map that we created. So we've got sandy end of the paddock, we've got some loams up here. So we've got a few different ways that we make these maps. A good way is just grab a satellite image of a previous lentil crop. On those loamy areas, they'll be really, really green. On those sandy areas, they'll be really, really thin. So then we just basically sow a lot more on the sandy soils and sow it really thin on the heavy soils. Another one is yield maps. Not quite as great because there's so many more things that can influence yield at times. You get a big wind that comes across when you're halfway through reaping a paddock, lentils shake out. Soil type maps, are great if you can ground truth them really well, but I'd much prefer to let the plant tell me what the soil is rather than a lab-based or some sort of approach that's trying to think of the word. I'll just skip it. Yes, but so like all variable rate, we got to ground truth it. It's not what we want to do. We always just want to get something out of the box and make it work. But you got to get on the foot falcon and have a look around and make sure it's working. So final seeding rates for lentils: 60 kilos a hectare on sands and down to 25 kilos a hectare on loams. So something like that, a little strategy like costs next to nothing. $1 a hectare probably. You can generally get the satellite imagery for free if you know where to go. Benefit. It's very hard to tell how much benefit we're getting, but $1 a hectare, it's not going to take much to pay it off. So pH line program, we are going to try and fix all our acidic sands just to grow better lentils, because what would happen with the lentil crops, they'd all hay off in the spring, and they're dead. You dig a hole and you find water, and in a water-limited environment, it's pretty frustrating to see a dead crop when you have water underneath. So the issues are in the subsoil. What's happening in our landscape? We're growing a crop. So you guys will be very familiar with how soils acidify, but we're growing a crop, taking nutrients from all in the soil. We're taking the grain off, and then we're dropping the residue on top. So we're getting a layer on the top of alkaline. So you just take a simple test of the topsoil, and you're finding that it's not too bad. It's a little bit alkaline, so you're all good. And we're finding this 20 to 30 centimetre band. Between 20 and 30 centimetres, we're finding acidic soil. So dumping a heap of lime on it, spreading it on, and then we've got a deep ripper. And the idea of these plates behind the deep ripper, so the deep ripper is going down, fracturing any compaction, and then the deep ripping tines below, the inclusion plates behind it are used to hold the soil out, and then the topsoil falls down behind the slot. So it's not about bringing up clays to the surface, it's about dropping the lime and organic matter down. And that helps the roots chase down in some of our infertile subsoils. So worked with the UniSA making these, which was great. It's always good working with an engineering department of a uni. They can always be very hyper-focused as an engineer is, but yeah, it's good to come out with something like this because there was actually a little bit of science behind it. Adding the length increased a lot more inclusion, but didn't add any draft. There's a little bit to do with down here. The draft, a lot of the draft is created from soil coming up here, so the cut up the bottom here was to help to make a little bit less draft. But yeah, so the ends of it is, it probably costs us around $75 a hectare to operate the machine when you account for time, fuel, depreciation on the tractor, but it can easily double lentil yields. So with the addition of the lime, one or the other will improve, but when you put them together, they work really well. So that was another good little win. Frost management. So I'm not sure, you guys obviously cold. I'm not sure if you ever get frosts and if they mean the same thing, but our frost that gets us is a frost while the crop's flowering. So you can do multiple things. You can delay sowing. So the idea of delaying sowing is you move your flowering window from late August to early September, and that will generally halve your chance of getting a frosty night in our environment. The problem is that our landscape is dune swale, so it's a flat and then a hill. The hill never gets frosted, the flat always does. So you're delaying sowing on your whole paddock, and that's reducing yield potential on the whole paddock. So we really want to get a bit more smarter about that. Or the other option is you do nothing, and a lot of people do nothing because they just can't do anything, heads in the sand. But yeah, option 3 was something I decided to try a little bit. So we zoned the areas, worked out where the frost is most likely going to be, and that can be something simply as just the low parts of the paddock. Other thing, it could be where we've been frosted before, a yield map. But yeah, and then so early in the season, we'll sow a winter wheat. The idea of the winter wheat is it takes a lot longer to grow. It stays dormant until it gets a certain amount of cold requirement. I don't know what the term is, vernalisation, or scientific terms, but basically a normal spring wheat will be out flowering and this one will still be staying, waiting a bit longer, and then when it does go, it actually grows quite fast. Let's try that. And then, but the problem with that is if you can't get that done because you haven't had an early start. So this year at the moment, we're up at 400 mil rainfall. Last year we had our second driest year on record behind 1914. I think we had 203 mils or something for the year. This year we're halfway through the year and we've had 50. So it's you can't grow a winter wheat when you've only had 50 mil of rain. So what we do if we don't get that early rain, we'll use a multi-variety mix. So the idea is I always try and pick 3 varieties of the same company, so I don't get a do-gooder to say, oh well, you need. I'm not sure if you guys have got endpoint royalties here, but we grow a variety. We've got to pay $4 or $5 a tonne to the seed company, and it's a fantastic system. We get really good varieties because of it. But so I try and stick with the same company so that the endpoint royalties flow to the right place. But yeah, so that just works well because if that one frost event comes through, it never takes out the whole crop. It'll only take out 30% of it, and then we hope that the other 60% recovers because in our environment, we can't rely on enough rain to get more tillers to come up and ready to go because we've probably only got one shot at it. So the cost to that sort of idea of trying to improve is just a bit of time really if you have the rate control in your machine. But it's the benefit, again, very hard to predict and measure, but definitely worthy if you don't get frosted. Soil moisture probe. So soil moisture probe, I'm not sure how much soil moisture probes are in New Zealand. You might not need to measure it because you've got lots of it, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a decision-making tool for me. Forecasts are very unreliable and making nitrogen decisions. Like a nitrogen decision is a hundreds of $1,000s decision. You're spending a lot of money on fertiliser and it's such a hard decision because you don't know what the right decision is. So any money you can spend to help you make that decision, I think is really, really valuable. And I'm trying to make these nitrogen decisions not gut feel anymore, trying to make them science-based. So emotions can really impair your decision-making. We're all emotive beasts. When it rains, if it's dry, it rains, we all perk up and say, oh, how good's this rain? The season's broken, it doesn't rain for 3 more weeks, and you're back down the pub drinking away your sorrows. So it helps track the soil moisture, and when combined with data from the previous year, it can be really valuable. So in our environment, if I know that I've got 75% soil moisture on the probe in September, I know I'm home. So I can push that nitrogen, I can try and grab that extra tonne of the hectare, throw another 100 kilos of urea out. So we don't want to apply any more nitrogen than we need. We're learning here at home versus here that we can actually store it year to year because we don't really have the rain that you guys do. Even though we've got sandy soils, they are prone to leaching, but we've got a bit of work going on in Australia about now called the N baking approach, and that's sort of proving that between 60 and 80% of our N can be carried from year to year if we don't use it. So that's been a good little win. So if you're a bit bullish on your decision making, it helps. If you know it's not going into lentil the following year, which is a legume crop, you'll push it a little bit harder. Cost soil moisture probe $2,500 plus $600 per annum, but it helps you when you're making 6-figure decisions. So I think that's a great investment on our farm. So protein machine. So we've got a protein machine in our combine. So protein for us is all about nitrogen efficiency. So our target range is about 10.5 to 11.5. If we grow milling wheat, we don't grow any feed wheat, but anything above 11.5, the guys don't seem to pay us enough for it. So to increase it beyond 11.5 and get H1, which is our grade, they just don't pay us enough money. So the protein machine, and if we go below 10.5%, we're usually finding that we're yield limited. So if we're delivering 10% protein, we haven't put enough fertiliser and our yields could have been higher if we applied a little bit more. So protein machine's all about, did we get it right? Did we did we under fertiliser, and which areas, and what can be learnt? So it gives us confidence to cut rates on soils so this is a similar paddock to what I saw before. We've got loamy soil up this end, sandy soil up the end. So you see this on a protein map, and this is a loam, and we cut our rates on that, and it's still glowing with over 13% protein. So to me, that tells me I'm happy to cut off of those soils, but it's basically a redistribution because down the bottom we're below 11.3, so we can apply some of that nitrogen down the bottom. So protein machine was a little bit harder spend, $18,000 to put it in the machine, but it does help that validate those six-figure decisions. Camera technology. So this is something that I haven't invested in, and it's because I don't see the value. Everyone in Australia at the moment is just saying, oh, this camera technology, it's going to change the game. We're going to reduce our herbicide use. We're going to only spray where the weeds are. But the biggest problem is the cost of the tech. So if you go down the bottom, we can see there's two different, I've done a little bit of a case study between two different companies. We've got Bilberry and Carbon B. They have two different business models. One of them slightly more expensive, and the other one has a subscription. So you've got to pay to unlock the technology to spray your weeds. But how I work these out is if you spend the money, you've immediately got to have a 5% interest cost on it. But that's not enough because you're taking the risk. You've also got to get a return on that money as well. So just a bit of a thing, $12,000 a year in finance cost over 7 years. The reason I say 7 years is because after 7 years, my boom spray's done 5,000 hours. It's my sole boom spray. I can't afford to do 5,000 hectares with a boom sprayer that's just breaking down all the time. So 7 years is about where I look to change over my machine. So the subscription's $14,000 a year. So it comes to a total annuals of $34,000. That doesn't add up, but what you'll realise is you've got to pay back the $240 over 7 years plus the interest. So it comes at $60,000 a year to own that machine, to own that just the cameras, and then the Carbon B, which you're paying you're not paying a subscription, and everyone thinks, oh, as farmers we all hate paying subscriptions, but yet if you're paying a subscription with a Bilberry compared to the bottom one, because it's cheaper, you're actually in front. So that was just a little interesting thing I learnt. So basics of it is haven't bought a camera sprayer yet because we're only in Australia currently. We're only really looking at spraying in the fallow stage. So we're spraying our summer weeds out of our bare stubble, and the green on green technology just isn't quite there. So once that improves, I think we could consider having a look at it. So adoption of the precision ag technology. I reckon the main thing you've got to think of, you've got to start with a problem, not a solution. So you guys might be sitting back thinking, oh yeah, I want to do what he's doing, that's great, but do you actually have a problem that I've got in South Australia? Probably not. So you've got to analyse your business and work out where your problems are, and don't listen to some rep that's going to tell you what your problems are, because you know what your problems are. So economics, that's a reason to adopt a technology or a tool, solve a problem. But you just got to be careful, because you don't want to solve a problem of having a dirty ute and spend $100,000 on a thing that cleans your ute. So I really like to spend a little bit of money to help make high value decisions. We're making decisions all the time, and if we can be a little bit more efficient at making those decisions, I think it's pretty important. But yeah, another one that people make decisions adopt is ego, or because the neighbours did, and that's probably not the best reason to adopt a technology or a tool. So this is something similar to a few things that I've looked at. Just a bit of a spreadsheet, back of the envelope type calculations. You can go into it as hard as you want, but general rule of is if you're spending something, you really want to get a 10% benefit of what you're spending. If you spend $300,000, you need to make at least $30,000 a year of benefit to actually justify the cost. And some of these things are getting too expensive to be able to justify. So free stuff. Everyone loves free stuff. So there's a few things that I found really valuable on the farm. Again, might be very different because our farming businesses are quite different, but Life 360, I'm not sure if there's any parents in the room that have heard of that app. Basically, it's an app that you can track your kids. I use it to track my employees. That sounds really creepy, but it wasn't really, I didn't start it. The boys at work, I employ a lot of young fellas, and they were the ones that thought it'd be a great idea. So they brought it in and they said, look, we're going to put it, all the truck drivers are going to have it. So this is a classic harvest. We've got tiles in our tractors that on our mother bins at harvest time. So if you move one of my truck drivers, this fella here, he's 78 years old, he drives one of my road trains. If I move the bin and tell him which paddocks it's going to go to, he just gets a bit, which one's that again? So I've got a tile in there as soon as it moves, and someone with a phone that's got the app walks past it, it updates. So yeah, it's just really good for harvest logistics. You don't need to buy trackers and put them in all your vehicles when everyone's got an iPhone and it can track, but you obviously got to have employees that are pretty keen, because I did have one fella that wasn't all that keen and didn't force it, but yeah, so he didn't put it on, but yeah, it works. Generally, most people are pretty keen because it works both ways. Google Maps, very simple app, just so handy for drop pins. So this is an example. This paddock here, I had some chemical damage from a new product that came out. I went and drove through the whole paddock on every single sandhill and put a star on the ones that I had to reseed. Love heart on the only sandhill that I didn't need to reseed. So just really great for just coming back. So simple, it's free. OneNote, just a good for sharing documents with staff. So this is an example, screenshot from a while ago, but like July jobs on, so things that we wanted to do, a list for pre-seeding. I got my spray chemical stock take on there, stuff that I got to do before harvest. Just a few different things on there that are just super easy. As farmers, it might be a bit different in New Zealand. We've always got pretty fine weather, so we don't ever want to go back in the office. We always want to be out in the field doing things. Whereas, yeah, whenever there's a rain day, we'll decide to go into the office. So I'm always making decisions in the paddock, whether it be selling grain or doing all sorts of stuff. Google Sheets is another one, similar thing, but probably use it for a little bit more heavy data stuff. So up the top, got my crop plan. I've got a chem tender, so we aggregate. So we've got 5 or 6 of us in a private agro group that aggregate all our chemical together. We just all got a shared spreadsheet, each with a column. We add it all in, and then we tender it out. And a good little way of doing that is, I'm sure it's the same here, but we've got agency products in Australia, very high margin for the retailers. If we aggregate our chemical all together, we've got the retailers really want that agency product because they make a lot of money. They'll practically do the other stuff for next to no margin at all. So it's a good way to bring our total cost of chemical down. One guy told me once, these chemical companies, they've got a really, really nice guy at the front because they work on that relationship space. But if it's the difference between his kid going to private school and yours, I think we need to send our kids to private school. So yeah, grain contracts are in there. I just found that I was out in the paddock, my phone pinged off, wheat prices jumped $10. I've got to sell, so I just sold it. Then I go home, kids just start screaming at me and I just forget to write it down. And so I just found having a little spreadsheet on my Google Sheets on my phone, I can just put in how many tonnes I sold and it just populates and how much I've got with my predicted yields and available to sell later on. It just helps me make those decisions without having to go back to the office. And just a few other things, like so an amelioration plan is just paddocks that I've deep ripped. Like yes, we've all got as applied maps, but it's just handy sometimes just to have it in your phone. Oh yeah, we deep ripped that. What year did we deep rip that paddock? And then combine settings, so that can go into Chris's work. This is just a Google Sheet document I share with my header driver, so he just knows roughly where our starting points. So that can be quite handy as well. So where to start? If you're looking at adopting a precision ag tool or going into variable rate, you've always got to start with a problem, not a solution. So many times people start with a solution and work out where the hell the problem is. It's always backwards. But so yield maps versus NDVI, they're great. One thing I didn't touch on was I like yield maps and NDVI to really tell me what my paddocks are doing. I like the plant to tell me rather than anything else. So yield map is great. It's what we get paid on. We get paid on yield. We don't get paid on growing vegetation. But those maps can be a little bit dodgy in terms of the data can be a bit noisy. Generally, data is currency though, so data collected now can be used in the future. I've been told that so many times when I was younger and it really annoyed me. I just like, shut up, I don't want to hear it. But there's so many times now where I'm growing a crop and I think the season is going a certain way, and I'll think, what was that yield map? I'd love to grab that yield map from that year, 10 years ago, to see what parts of the paddock yielded what, and that will dictate my nitrogen strategy on that paddock. So if that paddock in that really bad year, that back of that sand hill grew really good grain, this one didn't, I'll predict that it's going to do the same thing again, and I'll apply lots of nitrogen on that soil, and this soil over here, I'll really cut it back to save some costs. So the key is just to keep it simple, give variable rate a go, and don't let the search for perfect prevent you from reaching good. So many times when you're making assumptions on variable rates, you stand up front and you say, you should do this, you should do that, and people will say, oh, yeah, you made an assumption that this. Well, we're all making assumptions when we make a blanket rate, so you're already making an assumption, so if you can just do a little bit, it's better than doing nothing. And just make a plan. So where do you want to be in 5 years, and how will you get there, and what needs to be done now to get there? So it's very easy to say, oh, I want to be a millionaire by 2030, but if I'm not laying the groundwork to become that, it's not going to happen. So talk is cheap. Thank you very much. So get in touch. I don't really know too many people here, so come and shake my hand in the air and talk, rip into my speech or whatever you want to do. I'd love to make some friends, and just realised I have met a couple of you over the time, so it's been good to run in and catch up, and I'm glad to meet a few more people. But reach out or come to a season with us. I had a Kiwi fella do a season with me last year. He was he said he was from Canterbury, farming near the hills. So
All right, thank you, James. Okay, thank you, James. James is going to be on the panel, but maybe we could have one or two questions quickly at the moment, if anybody has a burning question. Yep, we have one down here.
Thank you very much, James. Superb presentation. One of the things I'm looking at with these subscription models, I'm seeing increasing numbers of these high-tech ag companies falling over, and then you're holding a baby which no longer works because the company controlling it is no longer in existence. How concerned are you?
Yeah, so definitely agree with that. I'm not sure if you guys got AgWorld over here. They're not going to go fall over anytime soon, I'll guarantee you that. But that's just been my reluctance to go with them, is you're just putting all your eggs into one basket. They say you can get your data out, and there's plenty of other companies that are the same. So I do find that if you can keep it in-house is great, but some of these programs are so amazing that it's hard to stay out. But I still think that the subscription, it's good to insulate a little bit, because at least you haven't spent all that money if you're paying annually, and hopefully they keep them honest by paying annually. But I don't know how some of these ag tech companies even start up. Like, their business cases are poor.
Cool. One question at the back, Bede.
Do you use your protein monitoring on the combine at harvest to segregate any of the lower protein grain as opposed to the high ones? Do you have capacity to be enough fields to zigzag around and take the bad parts?
Yeah, we have. We don't do it a lot. So our business model is we don't want to have too much idle capacity. So we're doing 5,000 hectares with one machine. My next door neighbour is doing about very similar, maybe a little bit less land. He's got 3 machines. So our business model is one machine, push it hard, run it really efficiently. So the idea of weaving around does reduce productivity a lot. However, we have done it a few times before in bad years where we just don't have that many tonnes. Things are happening a little bit slower. It's a slower paced harvest. But the idea of it is, now that we've had it for a few years, that those maps are starting to even out, so we don't feel the need to. But moisture is actually a big one though. We do that a lot with moisture. So with the protein machine, if you don't understand how a protein machine, it's NIR, you also get a very accurate moisture reading. The moisture meters that come in factory machines, terrible. NIR is very accurate. So we will start harvesting canola at 11%, maybe 11% if we're feeling really aggressive, but more likely 10% moisture. Delivery standards is 8%, because we'll be reaping plenty of canola at 6%. So we just fill up bins from 10 to 8. Once it goes to 8, we go straight to the silo, and then once it gets to 6, we start blending back out the 10 to make 8. So it just helps that one machine become super efficient by being able to reap more hours of the day and more just straight after rain events.
Can I?
What's driving your best prices?
I think ego. So the Yorke Peninsula is the highest land price per millimetre of rainfall received in the whole of Australia. So that's a bit confronting. And everyone says, oh, it's small holdings, it's tight, it's tightly held land. But I think there's a stat there that isn't circulated. I do think that it could be some of the highest tonnes per millimetre grown as well. So if you said tonnes per hectare, land price versus tonnes per hectare, I think would actually be reasonable. But no, I haven't actually done that statistic.
Okay, so James will be in the panel shortly, so we'll leave it at that for the moment. But thank you very much, James.